So we get questions all the time about travel teams, prep teams, what is their role and how do they impact an athlete and their development and or how they get to school or what schools they get to. And so there's a lot of confusion with this because for many people it's outside of their box of reality and it's not something that they're used to. Or 20 years ago there wasn't as many travel teams, obviously, and there's not a lot of people who are completely aware of what a prep team is or even what a prep school is, or what that means or what that looks like. But to get back to, I think something that a quote that relates to this for me is by Wayne Dyer, and it's right here. It's an inner knowing along with a burning desire is the prerequisite for beginning a person becoming a person capable of manifesting his or her heart's desire. What does that mean? Well, what that means is for us, when we were going through the process with one of our children, for starters, it was their choice to seek out travel teams and or prep schools or prep teams. And so you have to be really clear with what their goals are, and you need to be clear with what your goals are. And then you need to sit down and really evaluate each travel team individually and see if those things, pair up. And the same thing goes for a prep school or a prep team. If you're looking at a school and it looks like they've had people attend there in the past and they've gotten to where you hope to get, then it's conceivable that that might be a school to take into consideration. We're extremely happy with the results and the impact that our son has had with his coaches and the teachers and the students and the administrators at Wyoming Seminary. And so, and this isn't a plug for them other than the fact that we looked into it heavily. He had that option on the table for a while. And in the end, when he got real clear with his goals and what he was hoping to accomplish, and he wanted to prepare himself for that next level, then what we did was we sat down and said, okay, well, that's the next likely step. Well, it still took a little while for that to, kind of resonate with him. And when it finally did, then he made the call. We moved forward, and the rest is kind of history from this point. But you have to sit down and get real clear with yourself and what your need is from a travel team or a prep team. And so maybe where we are coming from isn't where you're coming from. So things to consider when you're choosing one. What is the primary objective in why you're looking for a team? It's all about your individual needs and the needs of your student athlete. You need to look at, like I said, the past athletes that have come from there and where they ended up and the different outcomes that they have. Different travel teams and prep teams have different goals and different objectives, different missions. So whereas some teams really will help you with that process, other teams not so much. Some coaches will kind of make your decisions for you, and whereas other coaches not so much. They want to create free thinkers, and they want you to reach that decision on your own. From our standpoint, when we look at a prep team or a travel team, it's really one of the greatest bridges to college that there is out there. And unfortunately, a lot of the travel teams are really not aware of that. The prep teams are highly aware of that because it's in their name, prep. A college prep program is obviously preparing that person for college, or that is at least part of their mission. So a travel team actually does a lot of the same things, but without the school adjunct to it. So when we sit down and look at this stuff, we're thinking, okay, educate and develop for the highest level. That's one of the things that we're thinking about when we think of a prep team or a travel team. Promoting to the next level, that's really important, and that's missed out on by a lot of the travel teams, not missed out on by too many of the prep teams. You'll find there's an environment where there is more promotion going on at those phenomenal teams, and you just see it obviously because of the level that comes out of that school and where those kids end up. Exposing to the next level competition, obviously on a travel team or a prep team, just by the the way that you get there, you have to kind of weed out a lot of the people who are just kind of on board socially, or they want to say that they're on a team. That's not really as much a situation that goes on with most travel teams and prep teams, at least the ones that are highly competitive. So next from there, we get to, you got to get to the competitions that the next level college coaches are at, or they're watching online, and where their showcases, or clinics or whatever. If you're not at those things, it's going to be very hard to promote you or have you be valued as somebody who is capable of being at that next level. And especially if you're trying to get a scholarship, or even just trying to get a walk-on spot on a team. And you need to be at those competitions as a student athlete anyway to showcase your abilities and character anyhow, because you need to show them, maybe even through losses, that you can come back and fight through that adversity. And without that opportunity, they don't get to see you at something, again, unless you're going to go to one of their camps. You're looking at building better student athletes to be sustainable and progressive college student athletes, which means hopefully you're building on their human performance, and you're also trying to keep them as healthy as possible so that they don't end up getting hurt immediately when they get to school and have to take a redshirt year for an injury, medical redshirt year. And then we're teaching habits that enhance their productivity. So you're trying to get them ready to be able to be successful at college, so that they can also be a showcase to your travel team or your prep team. Say, hey, look, this is so and so. They came here, they did it, they succeeded, and you can do the same thing. So then in addition to that, you need to make sure that there's a setup that provides guidance to move them onward and upward, and that needs to be progressive. So it needs to be, hey, you came in here and we're going to get you up to there. And so there needs to be a little bit of an assessment along the way of that. That isn't necessarily something that happens very often with travel teams, prep teams. I think you see a little bit more of that, but not as much with travel. So you got to find somebody who understands there's a need for a baseline, and then those updates of assessments to see really where you are. And then you got to be looking at whether or not they prepared them to be ready for all that they'll encounter at the next level. And so there needs to be, adversity mixed in there. There needs to be challenge on a daily basis. There needs to be all of that stuff that goes with it to ensure that when that kid gets to college, that they're not surprised by everything and the whole shock and awe of the situation. Whereas that travel team, that prep team, should get them around really challenging situations in front of coaches with high pressure situations, and to make sure that they're ready for what they're going to get thrown into. And this is most important for us, and you don't see this happen hardly at all. And unfortunately, it's really the real reason why we look for travel and for prep teams to work with and to have our student athletes work with, which is informing them of the process that leads to them getting into college and then being successful at college. And unfortunately, that is kind of the bread and butter of the travel team, but they don't necessarily understand that that is really the real reason why most of these kids are going to these travel teams. It's probably one of the first things that I hear from parents when I ask them, well, why did you choose this travel team? Oh, well, they're going to help get Susie into whatever school, or little Timmy's going to be going here or there because that's what this team does. But then you get to the team and you realize there isn't necessarily a process. There's just, there's been a couple of kids that have come from there that were successful, and they've put them in positions, or, they hope to get to a couple of these showcases, and then if they do well, then, there's availability at some of these other colleges. But the problem is there isn't really a process there. They don't understand that they're missing out time-wise, and they're not really looking at the development of the complete athlete. And so unfortunately, when they do check in with you, it's a little too little and a lot too late. So make sure, as you're deciding on a prep school or a prep team or a travel team, that you really look into it. And again, we did look into it, and it was the student athlete's choice, and they made, it's a tough decision to take time away from whatever you're going to be doing at home where it's comfortable. But, and this is very important, growth was not intended to be comfortable. If it was intended to be comfortable, it probably wouldn't be much growth. So when you sit down and you look at things, you might have to, and I don't like to use the word sacrifice too often. There are some things that might be sacrificed, but for the most part, when you sit down and you look at, oh, we're going to have to travel over here to get to this. Well, that's just the distance you're going to have to travel in order to get to your goal. And the more you do that consistently, the better off you'll be, and distancing yourself from the competition, because it's that distance in the travel and what you're willing to do that separates you in the time that you get out there to perform. So let's keep that in mind, and good luck in hunting.